Yeah, could you talk about how it came about that people, that Navajo people even living out of New Mexico could get in-state tuition?
In-state, not in, yeah, in-state tuition, yeah. Back when I, during the Tony and I administration, I was named, executive director of the commission, what was then called the Board of Educational Finance. It was the Commission on Higher Education. And the role of the Commission on Higher Education was to recommend the level of funding for all the institutions, all the universities and colleges in the state. And a board that does this and made the recommendations to the legislature. It also did other things like set up rules and regulations for determining residency for tuition purposes. We had a problem with Navajo country because some Navajos would be born in New Mexico, but went to school in Arizona. And when they graduated from high school, they wanted to come to UNM, for example. Their residency was always up in the, was an issue. And so often a lot of students we had a person, and they had to make their appeal to the Commission on Higher Education. Well, that's a bureaucracy that was a waste of money, in my opinion. And some Navajo educators from Navajo Nation came over to visit me, and they said, this is a real hassle because, we live in, part of the time our families could live in Arizona, part of the time they live in Utah, part of the time, and for all means and purposes, we were born in New Mexico, but because we go to school part-time in Arizona, our residency is always challenged. So a lot of us would like to come to New Mexico to college, but it's too much of a hassle. So they wanted to wanted to come up with a way to make that easier. So we talked about it, and finally we came up with the idea that why not, if you're an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, then, and you can prove that, they all have a number, if you can prove that, then automatically you become, for the purposes of tuition only, you're a resident of the state of New Mexico. So that means you could be, if you're a enrolled member of the Navajo Nation and you grew up in Phoenix, you could come to New Mexico, in-state tuition, you pay the same tuition in state. Well, for one thing, it saved us money because we didn't have to have a staff member doing all that, having to make it difficult on Navajo students. So that's been going on now for 25 years. I'm real proud of that because they gave me a nice award for it. But I thought that was kind of neat to just be able to say, I mean, Native American tribes aren't part of our state system. They existed before the states were here. So why should we treat them, as though they belong to this state versus that state? We didn't make Arizona happy over this when we did this. As a matter of fact, my counterpart in Arizona thought that we were stealing their students. I said, look, do the same thing. Why don't you offer in-state tuition for all the tribes in New Mexico? As long as they're a registered member of a tribe in New Mexico, they can go in-state tuition in Arizona. I said, well, we can't do that. I said, well, that's your problem, not ours. So that was kind of a solution to a problem that just seemed logical. We did get a little bit of criticism. There was a legislator from Gallup who didn't think we should do that. The interesting thing about that state senator, he's dead now, was that he was a businessman, and I think in the grocery business, whose business really, had a lot of trade with Navajos from Arizona. And it seemed to me that, why would he, but he thought that it wasn't fair for the taxpayers of New Mexico to be paying for that. And I told him, well, how would you like it if suddenly the Navajos decided that since, that maybe they ought to set up their own grocery stores in the Navajo Nation and not have to come over here? And we just kidded about that, but he was a little critical, so then I said, well, I'm not gonna change it because I have the authority to recommend to my board accepted it, and the law is, the law is pretty clear that it's this board's responsibility to determine, tuition, residence for tuition purposes. And unless the law has changed, and I don't see any reason for that to change, but in meetings, in open public meetings, he never would say anything. Because of course not. He wouldn't want the Navajos to hear that he opposes. He could, often legislators will do that, they'll come and give a bureaucrat like me a hard time, but they won't publicly tell you to your face at an open meeting where they could say, why did you do this? Unless they figure it's gonna, it's gonna play well in their hometown, but this wouldn't have played well for him at all.